Tommy had been a farmer all his life, working the same flat acres of land that his father had worked before him. The soil was tough and rocky, but it was all he knew. He lived in a simple farmhouse with his wife Diane and their teenage son Kevin. Life was hard but honest. One dry summer, the old well near the barn stopped producing enough water. Tommy decided to dig a new well in the north corner of the field, where the ground was softer. He woke early on a Tuesday morning, kissed Diane on the forehead while she still slept, and walked out with a shovel and a pickaxe. The sun was barely up, and the air smelled of dust and hay. Tommy marked a circle on the ground and began to dig. The first few feet were easy, just dark topsoil and small stones. He worked methodically, throwing dirt to the side, his muscles burning with each swing. After about an hour, the hole was up to his chest. He stopped to wipe the sweat from his eyes. That was when the shovel hit something that was not rock. It was a dull, muffled sound, like wood or thick fabric. Tommy crouched down and used his hands to brush away the loose soil. He felt a rough, heavy material. His fingers traced a long shape. Slowly, he uncovered a corner of a rolled-up tarp. The plastic was old and cracked, wrapped tightly around something soft and heavy. Tommy's heart began to beat faster. He grabbed the edge of the tarp and pulled. The dirt gave way, and a sickening smell rose into the morning air. He saw first a sleeve, then a pale hand with broken fingernails. Tommy stumbled back against the wall of the hole, breathing hard. For a long moment, he just stared. Then he scrambled out of the hole, fell to his knees on the grass, and vomited. He sat there for several minutes, trying to think. He knew he had to call the police. There was a phone in the kitchen. He stood up on shaky legs and began walking toward the house. But he only made it halfway across the yard. A pickup truck was coming up the dirt road. It was Russell, his neighbor from the farm 2 miles south. Russell was a heavy-set man with a smooth, friendly face and eyes that never seemed to blink. He parked next to Tommy's barn and got out, smiling. Tommy tried to compose himself. Russell asked if everything was all right. Tommy said nothing at first. Then Russell looked past Tommy toward the hole and the pile of dirt. His smile faded. He walked slowly to the edge of the hole and looked down. When he turned back to Tommy, his face was completely different. There was no warmth, no friendliness. Just a cold, calculating calm. Russell spoke quietly. He said he knew what Tommy had found. He said it was an old trouble, nothing that concerned a farmer like Tommy. Then Russell offered to take care of everything. All Tommy had to do was fill the hole back up, forget what he saw, and never speak of it again. In return, Russell would pay Tommy a large sum of money. Enough to fix the roof on the barn and buy a new tractor. Tommy looked at Russell's truck. He noticed a second man sitting in the passenger seat, a thin man with a shaved head and hard eyes. The man did not get out. He just stared at Tommy through the windshield. Tommy felt a cold hand close around his stomach. He shook his head. He said he was going to call the police. Russell's expression did not change. He simply nodded, turned around, and walked back to his truck. As he opened the door, he looked over his shoulder and said one last thing. He said Tommy should sleep on it. Then he drove away, dust rising in a thick cloud behind the tires. Tommy went inside and called the county sheriff. He told the dispatcher everything. They said a deputy would come in the morning. The rest of the day, Tommy stayed close to the house. He did not go back to the hole. He told Diane what had happened, and her face turned white. Diane wanted to pack bags and leave that night. But Tommy insisted they stay. This was their land, their home. He would not be chased off by Russell or anyone else. They ate dinner in silence. Kevin noticed the tension but did not ask questions. That night, Tommy checked all the doors and windows twice. He put a heavy chair against the back door. He kept a baseball bat next to the bed. He did not sleep. He lay in the dark, listening to the wind and the creak of the old house. Around 2 in the morning, he heard something. Not a loud noise, but a soft scraping sound from the front of the house. Tommy sat up slowly. He picked up the bat and walked barefoot to the living room. The moon cast thin light through the curtains. He saw nothing at first. Then he noticed the front door was slightly open. He was certain he had locked it. Tommy pushed the door open wider and stepped onto the porch. The yard was empty. But the hole near the barn had been disturbed. Fresh dirt was scattered around the edge. And the tarp was gone. The body was gone. Tommy stood there in the cold night air, gripping the bat so hard his knuckles turned white. He knew Russell had sent someone. He knew they had taken the evidence. And he knew that when the deputy arrived in the morning, there would be nothing to find. Tommy went back inside and locked the door. He did not sleep for the rest of the night. Morning came slowly, gray and heavy. Tommy sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee. Diane was making breakfast in silence. Kevin asked why his father looked so tired. Diane told him to eat and not ask questions. At 8 o'clock, a county patrol car pulled into the driveway. Deputy Floyd got out, a middle-aged man with a thick mustache and tired eyes. Tommy met him outside and led him to the spot where the hole had been. The hole was still there, but the tarp and the body were gone. Deputy Floyd looked around, kicked at the loose dirt, and asked Tommy if he was sure about what he had seen. Tommy said he was sure. He described the hand, the sleeve, the smell. He told the deputy about Russell's visit and the offer of money. Deputy Floyd wrote everything down in a small notebook. Then he walked over to the barn and looked inside. He walked around the house. He found nothing. He asked Tommy if he had any proof. Tommy said no. The body was gone. The tarp was gone. There were no photographs. Deputy Floyd sighed and said he would talk to Russell. But without evidence, there was nothing he could do. He told Tommy to be careful and left. Tommy watched the patrol car disappear down the road. He felt a deep, burning anger in his chest. Russell had won. At least for now. Tommy went back inside and told Diane what the deputy had said. Diane wanted to leave again. This time, Tommy agreed. But not because he was afraid. Because he needed time to think. They packed a few bags and drove to a small motel in the next county. Kevin still did not understand what was happening. Tommy told him there was a problem with the well and they had to stay somewhere else for a few days. Kevin accepted the answer, though his eyes showed doubt. They stayed in the motel for 2 days. Tommy barely slept. He kept replaying the events in his mind. The way Russell had looked at him. The thin man in the passenger seat. The open door in the middle of the night. He realized that Russell had not just taken the body. Russell had sent a message. The message was that Tommy was not safe anywhere. On the 3rd day, Tommy drove back to the farm alone. He wanted to check on the animals and grab more clothes. Diane and Kevin stayed at the motel. Tommy arrived at noon. The farm looked normal. The cows were in the field. The chickens were scratching in the yard. But something felt wrong. He parked near the house and got out. The front door was closed, but the lock was broken. The wood around the handle was splintered. Tommy pushed the door open slowly. Inside, the house had been torn apart. Every drawer was pulled out. Every cupboard was open. The couch cushions were slashed. The mattress in the bedroom was flipped over and cut open. Glass from a broken picture frame crunched under his boots. Tommy walked through each room in a daze. They had taken nothing valuable. The television was still there. Diane's jewelry box was untouched on the dresser. They were not looking for money. They were looking for something else. Or maybe they were just sending another message. Tommy went to the kitchen and opened the drawer where he kept his tools. A knife was missing. A large kitchen knife with a wooden handle. It was not on the counter. It was not in the sink. It was just gone. Tommy felt a chill run down his spine. He walked outside and looked toward Russell's property. 2 miles away, a plume of smoke rose from behind the trees. Not a house fire, but a controlled burn, like someone burning trash or old wood. Tommy thought about the body. He thought about the tarp. He thought about the missing knife. He turned and walked to his truck. He did not call the deputy. He knew it would be useless. Instead, he drove to the hardware store in the small town nearby. He bought a heavy padlock, a new chain, and a hunting knife with a 5-inch blade. Then he went to the motel. He told Diane and Kevin they were not going back to the farm. Not yet. He said they would go to his brother's house 3 states away. Diane agreed. But Tommy had no intention of running. That night, after Diane and Kevin fell asleep, Tommy sat in the motel bathroom and made a plan. He knew Russell was not a stupid man. Russell would expect Tommy to be scared. To run. To give up. But Tommy had lived on that land for 50 years. His father was buried in the small cemetery behind the old church. His mother had died in the farmhouse kitchen. That land was not just dirt and grass. It was his blood. Tommy decided he would not leave. But he would not be a victim either. He would find proof. He would find something that Deputy Floyd could not ignore. The next morning, he drove back to the farm alone again. This time, he did not go to the house. He parked a 1/4 mile down the road and walked through the tall grass to the edge of Russell's property. He stayed low and moved slowly. The smoke from the day before was gone. But he found a patch of blackened earth behind Russell's barn. The ground was still warm. In the ashes, Tommy saw fragments of burned fabric and melted plastic. He knelt down and sifted through the debris with a stick. He found a metal button. And he found a small piece of bone. Blackened but unmistakable. Tommy wrapped the bone in his handkerchief and put it in his pocket. Then he heard a sound behind him. He turned. Russell's thin man, the one with the shaved head, was standing 20 feet away. He was holding the missing kitchen knife from Tommy's house. He did not speak. He did not move. He just stood there, blocking the path back to the road. Tommy slowly rose to his feet. His heart was pounding, but he kept his hands visible. He said he was just leaving. The thin man shook his head. He took one step forward. Tommy reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the hunting knife he had bought. He flipped open the blade. The thin man stopped. For a long moment, the two men stood facing each other in the gray morning light, surrounded by the smell of ash and cold dirt. Then the thin man smiled. He turned and walked away, disappearing behind the barn. Tommy did not wait. He ran through the field, jumped a fence, and did not stop until he reached his truck. He was shaking so badly he could barely turn the key. But he drove away, the small piece of bone still warm against his thigh. Tommy did not go back to the motel. He drove straight to the county sheriff's office. He walked into the front lobby with dirt on his boots and ash on his hands. He asked to speak to Deputy Floyd. A clerk made him wait for 20 minutes. Finally, Deputy Floyd came out, looking tired and annoyed. He led Tommy into a small interview room with gray walls and a metal table. Tommy pulled the handkerchief from his pocket and unwrapped the piece of bone. He placed it on the table. Then he told the deputy everything. The open door. The ransacked house. The missing knife. The thin man with the blade. The burned patch behind Russell's barn. Deputy Floyd listened without interrupting. When Tommy finished, the deputy stared at the bone for a long time. Then he asked Tommy if he was willing to sign a formal statement. Tommy said yes. The deputy left the room and came back with a tape recorder and a form. Tommy repeated his story slowly, answering every question. The deputy asked about the knife. Tommy described it. The deputy asked about the thin man. Tommy said he did not know the man's name, but he had seen him twice, always with Russell. The deputy nodded. He said he would get a warrant to search Russell's property. But he warned Tommy that a single piece of burned bone might not be enough. It could be an animal bone. Or it could be nothing at all. Tommy felt his hope drain away. But he did not give up. He told the deputy about the metal button he had found in the ashes. He had left it at the burn site. The deputy said he would send someone to collect it. Tommy left the sheriff's office and drove back to the motel. Diane was waiting by the window. She saw his face and knew something had happened. Tommy told her everything. Diane began to cry. Kevin finally demanded to know the truth. Tommy sat down on the edge of the bed and told his son everything, from the hole in the field to the knife in the thin man's hand. Kevin's face went pale, but he did not cry. He just asked if they were going to fight back. Tommy said they already had. That night, no one slept. They waited for a phone call that did not come. The next morning, Tommy drove back to the farm again. He was tired, but he could not stay away. He needed to feed the animals and check on the house. He pulled into the driveway and saw a county patrol car already there. Deputy Floyd was standing by the barn with two other officers. They had searched Russell's property. They found the burned patch. They found the metal button. They also found a shallow grave behind Russell's cornfield, not far from the property line. Inside the grave were the remains of a man. The body was wrapped in a tarp. The same tarp that Tommy had found and then lost. Deputy Floyd told Tommy that Russell had been arrested an hour ago. The thin man, whose real name was Mick, had been arrested as well. The knife from Tommy's kitchen was found in the back of Russell's truck. The knife had traces of blood on the handle. Not from the body in the grave, but from another victim months ago in a different county. Russell was not just a neighbor who had made a mistake. He was a man with a history. A man who had killed before. Tommy stood by the barn and watched the officers work. He felt no satisfaction. Only a heavy, hollow relief. Deputy Floyd walked over and shook Tommy's hand. He said Tommy was lucky to be alive. Tommy nodded but said nothing. He looked toward the house. The broken front door was still hanging open. The wind blew through the splintered wood. He knew it would take time to fix everything. The locks, the walls, the feeling of safety. Some things could be repaired. Other things could not. That evening, Tommy drove back to the motel and brought Diane and Kevin home. They parked in the driveway and sat in the truck for a long time, looking at the farmhouse. The sun was setting behind the barn, casting long shadows across the field. Tommy finally opened his door and stepped out. He walked to the front door and pushed it open. The house was still a mess. Broken glass, torn fabric, overturned furniture. Diane began to cry again. Kevin put his arm around her. Tommy picked up a broken chair and set it upright. He walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where the knife used to be. The drawer was empty. He closed it. He turned to Diane and Kevin and said they would clean everything tomorrow. Tonight, they would just be together. They sat in the living room on the floor because the couch was ruined. They ate cold sandwiches from a gas station. They did not talk much. But they were together, and that was enough. A week later, the county prosecutor called Tommy. He said Russell had confessed to 2 murders in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Russell would spend the rest of his life in prison. Mick, the thin man, had also confessed and would serve a long sentence. The body in the grave was identified as a man who had disappeared 2 years earlier. The family of that man finally had answers. Tommy did not feel like a hero. He felt like a farmer who had dug a hole and found a nightmare. But he also felt something else. He felt that he had done the right thing. He had not taken the money. He had not looked away. He had not run. He had stood on his land and faced the darkness. And the darkness had lost. Months later, Tommy filled the hole near the barn. He did not dig a new well. He hired a company to drill a proper one on the other side of the property. He planted grass over the old hole and let it grow. Sometimes, on quiet nights, he would walk to that spot and stand there in the dark, remembering. But he did not dig anymore. Some things should stay buried. The farm returned to its slow, hard rhythm. Diane planted flowers near the front porch. Kevin graduated high school and said he wanted to stay and help with the farm. Tommy nodded and handed him a shovel. Life went on, not the same as before, but still good. And every time Tommy saw Russell's old property, now empty and overgrown, he felt a quiet gratitude. He had been given a chance to do the right thing. He had taken it. And that, he knew, was the only thing that mattered.